if you're like most people, you probably struggle with limiting beliefs. You probably have many limiting beliefs that control your perception and behavior of life unconsciously, meaning that you don't even know that it's happening. And these patterns, they're unconscious, right? And let me explain exactly what I mean by that. These patterns replay themselves habitually. They extend themselves into the future until you consciously intervene, until you consciously break the pattern. This is how the subconscious works. It kind of has a sort of autopilot like mechanism to it where when it builds a pattern, it continuously begins to reinforce the pattern. And these patterns have a sort of drive to survive. They actually seek to maintain themselves, which is why they keep reinforcing themselves. In the same way that you have a drive to survive, a lot of these patterns operating in the background of your psyche have that same sort of pattern, that same kind of drive to want to continuously existing and surviving in the future. Because the entire human system is very oriented towards survival. So it makes perfect sense that a lot of these sort of unconscious mechanisms also have that element of survival kind of embedded within them. And that's going to be a very key point moving on in this video. So in this video, I want to give you a lot of core information and a bit of a guide on how this stuff kind of works, so you have a good mental framework of it, and then what do you practically do in order to break out of this cycle, out of these patterns. And I really want you to understand that in order to get any kind of meaningful results with this work, you're going to have to continuously return to it in the same way how if you wanted to build muscle, what would you do? You'd have to go to the gym over and over and over again. But not only that, you'd have to learn how to properly lift the weights. You'd actually probably even need a personal trainer, right? You need guidance, help, books, etc. You would actually need help learning all this kind of stuff so that you can actually be effective. It's the same thing with this inner psychological stuff, and the mind is very tricky. So to be quite honest, with this kind of stuff, it can even be harder than just, of course, getting jacked. But the same principle applies of being committed to this process. Without that actual commitment, there's no real point of this work. You're not going to get anywhere with it. There's not going to be any real success. So let's get right into the information. So because the pattern is unconscious, you have to learn how to make it conscious. And I want to give you a lot of core things to actually start paying attention to in relation to a lot of these patterns. So the first thing I really want you to actually begin to notice is that the pattern is held in the body and the mind. And the reason why I say body and mind is really because there's no separation between the two. There's no actual separating boundary between the body and the mind. They're totally one. And when we begin to view them as two separate, we're actually going to miss out on a lot of subtle information that's very essential to really becoming conscious, which involves having a felt connection to the body and actually learning to live from within the body. That's a bit of a topic for another video, but let's just move on with this one. So a core part of this is just learning to watch your thoughts, watch your beliefs, especially through a meditation practice where you can essentially just not react to what's going on inside of yourself, where you can just observe thoughts rather than being reactive towards them, pushing and pulling on them and getting lost in them. Because if you actually observe your life right now, a good way of describing it, right, one point of view, is just lost in thought. You're always thinking, right? You're not really out of your thoughts, right? You're just like habitually believing in them in an autopilot sort of zombie-like fashion, right? We kind of walk around like zombies, almost like another good way of saying it is kind of like people sleepwalking, but except we don't really manage to kind of bump into stuff all the time, right? We're not really present or grounded in our experience. We're just kind of like lost in thoughts, kind of avoidant of ourselves and our experience. And this actually perpetuates the pattern. So learn to just observe repetitive thoughts. But not only that, I want you to actually pay attention to what kind of emotions your thoughts actually, what kind of emotions are connected to your thoughts and the reaction that happens inside of your body. So certain thoughts, right, they start arising and you start to actually maybe feel shame or guilt or some frustration, right, etc. And the solution here isn't to like stop thinking those thoughts. I got to think more positive thoughts, right? Because this is just like another game of avoidance, essentially. The thought is kind of like a surface level phenomenon. And then underneath that surface, there's a whole bunch of complex dynamics that are giving rise to that surface level phenomenon. And it's within those dynamics that we need to start shining our attention. Or else all those inner mechanisms are just going to keep playing themselves out and they're going to keep creating the same result. So essentially, there's emotions tied to your limiting beliefs that are actually stuck in the body. And when beliefs like, unworthiness, or like you're too afraid to approach a girl, right? Because fundamentally you believe that you're not worthy enough. You're not confident in yourself. You don't believe that you are good enough to even like do such a thing, do such a radical thing. There's emotions tied to this that have to be processed. And not only that, they need to actually be released from the body mind, right? And without being able to shine your attention on that, those dynamics are going to get stuck in place and they're just going to begin to continuously reinforce themselves. There's not going to be any real shift in your being or real personal growth. At best, it'll be a surface level change, which of course, if you're really wanting deep personal growth, you don't want a surface level change. You want something that fundamentally changes your life, right? Which is going to be a fundamental change to your consciousness, to your psychology, to your being as a whole, the whole spectrum of who and what you are. So on top of emotions, I want you to identify where they are in the body and all the patterns of constriction around that emotion. Because in order to not feel emotions and sensations that we've once repressed, we actually constrict and tense the body. So there's emotions tied to a lot of our bodily tensions. And those tensions and emotions are tied to our beliefs. And the more we can actually learn to exist within those tensions, bring awareness into our body, inhabit the internal space of our body, the more it begins to open up, the more that fear, habitual fear, begins to kind of loosen up, and the more we can actually return to a state of openness to life, a state of receptivity, a state of flexibility, a state of attunement, a state of curiosity, a state of connection to ourselves, our environment, other people, our own consciousness. So another very important part is learning to question the beliefs that you have. And this is probably something that you don't really do, because in your life, you're probably finding yourself just kind of habitually believing your thought process. And I want to make a very important distinction here between kind of going to war with your thoughts versus just like an open kind of questioning, just like a very, very gentle, is this really true? Right? Can you feel my energy here? Can you kind of feel my approach? Right? It's not like, there's no like struggle, there's no fight. It's just like, is this really true? Like, what is this really tied to? What is this really doing to me? What's the emotion related to it? Where did this really come from? Where did I pick this up from? Did I create it myself? It's just like this genuine inquiry into your internal world, and you care. Can you notice there's a sense of care within this sort of method that I'm giving you? There's an actual care for what's going on inside of you, because the truth is that your internal world deserves care. Right? It actually needs awareness and nurture and care for it to kind of like function in a fluid way rather than being so stuck and rigid. In order for it to be healthy, it really needs awareness, attention, and care. So you can begin to ask questions like, what is the belief behind this action, or what belief is controlling me? And we'll begin to dig into this a bit more specifically. But first, I want to bring up another very important aspect of this whole inquiry process, which is beginning to kind of examine the origins of this. And you don't have to get too lost in this, like some stereotypical therapist, tell me about your childhood. But there's a lot of value in that as well. Right? You don't want to get too stuck in always trying to observe the past and all this stuff. But there's a lot of core insights that you can kind of get that are going to be helpful to your present situation. So examine the origins of the belief. Really ask if the belief is truly yours or something you picked up from family, culture, or just kind of past situations. You really want to just openly inquire into, where did this come from? And you don't want to force an answer, but you want it to kind of just be like this open inquiry where the answer kind of comes to you, where you're not so much trying to just like put the answer into experience, but more so you're leaving your experience to just kind of be open and then let the answer come through organically. Where did this belief come from? Maybe I picked it up from school or from culture or from family, or maybe I was, down on my luck one day and there was like these repeated negative events, and then I kind of came to some kind of conclusion really fast. And you know what? Maybe it didn't really reflect the whole of life very accurately, but maybe I was kind of stressed in that time and I created that experience. Maybe it came from my own childhood or whatever, right? Like my own inner stress as a child, etc. Right? You don't have to get too hyper specific, but just kind of notice that you picked it up at one point, right? It came into being and then it actually started to perpetuate itself, right? That's a very core part of just kind of recognizing that it wasn't always like this. So many limiting beliefs come from past experiences, childhood conditioning, or societal influences. Think about where each belief might have originated. Now we got to get into actually challenging the beliefs that you really have. So are they really true? Right? And I really want you to kind of feel how I'm relating to this question. It's not forceful. It's not like I'm just trying to like get the answer and just like have it here. And it's not like anxious. It's not coming from like this need to know. I gotta know. I gotta know. It's coming from just like openness. It's coming from curiosity. It's coming from a desire to just like simply understand. Right? It's coming from like a more pure place rather than like one of tension and like kind of just neuroticism and unsettledness. It needs to be present. It needs to be settled into the moment. This is when your mind is going to work the absolute best. And this is when you're going to get a lot of the juiciest, most creative insights that you can really generate. So are these beliefs really true? Look for counter examples in your life where this belief did not hold. Notice that no belief is absolutely true. That's something true about just the nature of beliefs in general, which I'm going to have a 2-part series on beliefs coming up soon. But just notice that it's not absolute. And that's it. It's not absolutely true. It's something that maybe holds some partial truth at best, but it's not the big picture of life. Maybe it captures some details, but again, you don't want to get fixed on some details and then like blow that out of proportion to be the big picture, right? Especially when you recognize that the belief came into being at one point and it's not just stuck this way. The behavior, the belief, all that stuff, it came into existence and then it started to repeat itself, meaning that it wasn't always that way and there's another way of being, right? There's also this capacity for us to actually change and grow and develop and let go of things that don't actually help us anymore. So moving on is replacing your ideas with healthier ideas that serve you. Install habits in your life that actually put healthy ideas into your mind continuously, like reading a lot of books. That's why I got a free book list. Cutting out the bullshit, essentially. Cutting out unnecessary garbage you see on the internet, right? This is especially around the US election time. It's totally full of a lot of unnecessary garbage, dogma, ideology, closed-mindedness, just a lot of low consciousness information. Right? Even the habit of always being on these screens kind of puts you into a low consciousness state. So when you're always kind of doing patterns that put you into a low consciousness state, like eating a lot of junk food, you don't take care of your physical body, you don't stretch, you don't get the connection that you need, the work you do, you feel out of alignment with, right? When your life and all these structures are kind of not working together, right? It's going to be harder to do this kind of work as well. You kind of want your conditions to be able to serve this kind of work. You want your lower needs to actually feed into your higher needs, which actually takes a higher level of consciousness. You want to actually bridge the gap between your lower self and your higher self, your needs for sex, connection, relationships in general, your needs for money, all this stuff. You kind of want to start bridging all this stuff together. You want to think in a more interconnected way. That's a bit complicated. I can't go into too much depth about that in this video. So I kind of want to just get right back on track. Essentially, installing habits that help you to raise your consciousness. Installing habits that help you to get high quality ideas into your mind continuously rather than habits that continuously drain your energy, make you feel sucked, make you feel sucked of energy, make you feel drained, make you feel tense. Essentially habits that keep putting you into survival mode unnecessarily. The key word there is just, it's not necessary. So an example of that is like meditation, daily reading, eating healthy foods, actually having a very nutritious diet, right? Cutting out a lot of unhealthy habits like scrolling on your phone right away in the morning, having good boundaries with technology, watching your screen time, going out in nature, connecting with people who are like-minded. That one's really important. Moving on is literally just practicing meditation, like I was kind of just talking about. You need some actual way to just sit and observe. Because if you're honest with yourself in your life, a lot of the time you're just reacting to the arising phenomena in the present moment. There's something happening, a thought, a feeling. Someone says something, there's some kind of circumstance. You're just reacting to it. You need a way to kind of just get into the body, relax, right? I don't really mean just like relax in this corny way of like, yeah, why don't you just relax? But some way to kind of just take a step back so that you're not always so engaged in what's happening. A way to kind of take a step back, a way to just observe it so that when you are engaged, it's conscious rather than compulsive. Big difference there, right? Between conscious and compulsive. So learning to just observe thoughts without judgment and reactivity. This allows you to create some inner psychological space, aka some inner breathing room. So what emotions are created by these beliefs? This is going to be a question that really this is where the rubber begins to really meet the road with that question. Because this is where you can really begin to practice feeling into your emotions, feeling into the body, getting some of these more subtle nuances rather than being so disconnected from yourself in this direct experience. Got some hiccups. So meditation plus journaling/writing can uncover deeper beliefs and patterns that are influencing your behaviors unconsciously, right? Learning to just write this stuff down, get your internal world onto a piece of paper. A lot of people aren't going to do this, right? But you need to actually have some self-motivation here and really just do it. Don't be afraid to just grab a pencil and just start writing down some of these core beliefs. You want them to be as clear as possible, right? Maximize your ability to make yourself clear in your life. Moving on is applying mindfulness in daily life and not just on the cushion. So the thing is that you can kind of, be aware on the cushion, right? And a lot of times if you're practicing meditation, you'll recognize that, wow, I'm really not very aware most of the time. I get lost in thought very easily. I kind of just get like sucked out of the present very easily, right? So essentially this next point is just applying mindfulness to your daily life, taking these principles off of the cushion and then applying them to your life. Because in the midst of your limiting belief, in the midst of this experience, that situation, X, Y, and Z, that's when you go unconscious, and that's when you have to actually apply all these principles and all these things that you're learning from my videos and that hopefully you're practicing on a daily basis, right? It's like we're taking all this stuff and we're directly applying it to our life, right? This is really where the rubber just really begins to meet the road. So moving on is just taking action to reinforce better ideas, surrounding yourself with healthy people, find the right environment or create one that actually helps you, and then doing the right activities that support your growth and continuously give you better ideas and information. A final point that is really going to help you is really noticing repetitive thoughts, right? Because a lot of your beliefs, right, they're just repetitive thoughts that keep on reinforcing themselves. So really write down, right? Start to pay attention to your mind rather than letting it kind of just go and do its chaotic thing. Start paying attention to it. Start writing down a lot of the repetitive thoughts that you have, especially about yourself. Notice how much you criticize yourself. Notice how much you judge and criticize other people. What beliefs are really driving that? And how does it make you feel? Probably makes you feel rather constricted and tense and disconnected. Right? So you're looking for these patterns. Think in terms of patterns. Recognize that there's a cycle going on. Write down the cycle and start applying some of this information. If you want some bonus help, I do one-to-one coaching. You can apply to work with me. Link is in the pinned comment. But that's all I can do for this video. Take it easy.